Today, we are going to be doing my January reading wrap-up. Now, I never thought that I would do a monthly version of this because I never thought I'd be a reader enough to be able to do videos like this. And so I don't know if I'm going to be doing this every single month this year, but whenever I read like 3 or more books in a month, in a single month, I will try to do a little wrap-up video and let you know my thoughts throughout the course of the year as I read. This month in January, I read 4 whole books. I kind of DNFed one book, but we'll get to that. And I will also share my TBR for February, which is a very special video, so you're gonna wanna stay tuned for that. And then I will give a fan fiction update because yes, I am still continuously reading fan fiction in my reading journey as well. And I'm not gonna lie, this video, I read 2 5-star books and 2 4-star books. So this is a very positive video besides the single DNF, which isn't even like a really negative reason. Anyway, let's start with my first 5-star read, which was my first read of the entire year, and that is episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. So this follows a ghost hunting reality TV show crew who are filming episode 13 of their show, and they're trying to get renewed for season 2, and they choose the Paranormal Research Foundation as their next location, which is a derelict mansion where weird experiments happened in the 1970s. Now, this is a found footage style book, and if you've been a viewer for a long time, you know found footage movies are my favorite kind of horror movies. That is my favorite formatting. So to have a found footage book, it seems like it would be difficult, and I don't even think this is like the first one to ever do it. But the way that they do it in this book in particular are journal entries. We have raw camera footage that is laid out like you would write out camera footage. There are texts and emails and different ways to portray found footage in this book, which I find so creative. It is absolutely genius. I had a thought before I even read this, like if I write a book, I want to write a book one day that's in the found footage style. Now for this book, I'm not going to lie, I started this in like October or November or something. I got about 100 pages in and put it down and did not pick it back up again until January, until this month. I think it was a couple things. I mean, life just got a little bit weird there and I was busy doing other things. That was like my busy season for this channel, as you know, with like different videos and just watching a ton of movies. A lot of movies came out in theaters, so I was just busy, and I feel like that's why I didn't pick it up, but I really was not motivated to pick it up because I was still reading. I was reading other things. I just decided to move on to something else. I'm a mood reader at the end of the day, which is why I'm going to talk about the DNF later in this video. But something about this did not hook me in right off the bat. I think it was after the first like major scare in this book. It just wasn't hitting it for me. And I felt like, which you're probably wondering, how does she give this 5 stars then? Because I thought the whole book was going to be like the first scare, and I did not enjoy that as much. It was very cliche, your traditional haunting kind of thing, and I wanted something weird. I wanted something different and unique because the style of this book was different and unique. And boy, did I get what I asked for. You just got to keep on reading. I feel like the pacing gets a lot better as well after halfway or so. This became genuinely scary and unsettling in ways that I cannot even go into because it'll spoil the book. But this does something so incredible with playing with space and time that just blew my mind. And it was just so much more than I could have ever wanted for this book. Like, this is not going to be your traditional haunted house or traditional ghost story, or even like your standard, oh, reality TV show goes ghost hunting. Like, we've seen that before, right? We've done that. There are movies about that. This is not that. This is not even close to that. This just goes in a really weird direction that I just want to relive the last like third of this book, or quarter, I'm gonna say quarter of this book, like over and over again. If I could go back and erase my memory and read it for the first time, it just and so while it took a while to get there and for me to like really get into this book, man, am I glad I did not put this down forever, because this immediately became 5 stars once things started happening in a really weird and intense way, like just unexpected. And naturally, a found footage book, I expected it to be 5 stars, to be honest, and then I read 100 pages and I was like, I don't know about that. I don't think it's gonna be a 5-star book. And then it came back around and it saved it for me. Next up, I read At Dark I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca. Now, they kindly sent this to me. I got this as an ARC as well, and I decided to read it in January. I did read it before it came out. This is available now. It came out on January 28th. I even have it signed by Eric. Now, this is kind of ironic because I received this like halfway through last year or something like that, and I could have read it then, but I don't think I would have fully enjoyed my experience of it had I not gone through the things I went through in the later part of the year. That it just worked out to be really good timing in my life to pick this book up, and it was exactly what I was craving. That really dark and disturbing, heavy nature of a book is what I wanted. So this follows a man who has faced a lot of tragedy in his life in a very short period of time, and he kind of helps others while they are struggling and creates this ritual for them. And so they like hire him to perform this ritual. Gives them a new appreciation for life and things like that. But that's not everything. There's this really weird dynamic in here, relationship. I don't know. This honestly reads like short stories. There's like multiple parts to this book, and it's almost like 3 short stories in this, and it all kind of ties back to his past and his grief. So it's a very dark portrayal of grief, and it's not going to be a happy ending, a happy-go-lucky kind of story where it comes back around and gives you hope about, does not do that, okay? It's not a feel-good book. It's very dark and very heavy. Personally, I've always loved Eric's writing. I just really resonate with the way that they write, and it's just so beautiful to me, the way that they tell stories, that it always resonates. Like, I can always count on the writing to really hook me in. I think it's beautiful. And all of the stories really push my boundaries, and sometimes that is what I want. However, this one pushed my boundaries a little bit too far. It went over the line for me as to what I'm comfortable with, and I didn't know, so I did not check trigger warnings or anything, maybe because the book wasn't even out yet. I didn't think to really check. I wish I would have. I don't think I would have still read the book, but there was a scene I really wish that I skipped in the end. I think it goes without saying, with all of Eric's books, I really recommend checking trigger warnings because they do write very dark and disturbing stories, and specifically for this one, I think. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there are like children involved, and that's like a hard line for me of things that I just don't read. Luckily, it's not, I don't know how to explain it. It's graphic in a way, but it's in a description and not action, if that makes sense. Anyway, I didn't necessarily connect with this main character on the grief level that they were experiencing, or like the type of person that he is. Like, I don't resonate with the character themselves, but I could really appreciate the character arc that's in this book. Like, there are like weird sexual descriptions that aren't my favorite. I don't really love when horror and like those kind of scenes and sexual scenes go dark or horrifying. I don't love that combination, and I do feel like Eric does that quite a bit. So it's almost like a uncomfortable, unpleasant experience. Can I say that? Is that weird? I still give it 4 stars. I still really enjoyed the writing. That's my favorite part of Eric's books, is the writing. Sometimes though, that's why we read extreme and disturbing horror, is because it's unpleasant, right? Like, that's what we want sometimes. So if that's what you're looking for and it's a story about grief and loss, I definitely recommend this. I think it's beautifully written. Next, I guess I just really was in a literary fiction mood because I read 2 literary books back to back. They're not horror stories at all. Well, kind of, I guess. I guess you could argue there's horror elements. Anyway, the next book I read was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. So this follows a writer who happens to be at her very successful friend's apartment the night that she dies. And she decides to take her completed manuscript from her office, rework it a little bit, and publish it under her name, although she uses a different pen name to make her a little bit more racially ambiguous. The main character is white, I should say. So this has a lot of commentary on racism. The main character herself, it has a lot of lines that are very clearly about race and very uncomfortable to read sometimes, but especially in the publishing industry. I really enjoyed this book as someone who does want to be a writer and be published. I learned a lot about like the publishing industry, which I found really fascinating as an element in this story. And our main character, extremely unlikable, and I have discovered that those are some of my favorite kind of books because every time I read a main character that is unlikable, I tend to give the book 5 stars. I learned this when I read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, and, you know, part of the Hunger Games universe, and it's President Snow's backstory. And obviously he is an unlikable person in the later books. And so I love that complicated nature of reading a book where you don't actually like the main character. And I really enjoyed that Yellowface was written in first person, so we really got her inner workings and got to hear her internal monologues all the time, as horrendous as they were. There's something so entertaining about reading a main character that is just making constant bad decisions. I think that's so fascinating because it feels real. It feels like realistic to have a character that is morally gray or just completely unlikable. I think that's fascinating, and it's a really cool way to write a story because typically that's not what we read. So given that, I can see why some people wouldn't like that portrayal, but I think if that's something that you're used to or you enjoy yourself, that you would understand like why the character is written in this way, because we're not meant to like her pretty much at all. However, there are like sympathetic moments, and her justifications are desperate. Like, she's a desperate human, and so that reads across as like sympathy for her, and we feel for her. We understand to an extent, but you're just like, God, please just stop and just stop making bad choices. I do feel like the climax was just okay, and it could have definitely been executed a little bit better, or like something else, because I didn't love the reveal in the end. But I really liked how the story played out and how it was written. But overall, I really enjoyed my reading experience of this, and I had to give it 5 stars because it was just unlike anything that I had really read before, and really solidified the fact that I love reading main characters that I don't like. As long as they're written well and it's complicated, I think that makes for a really entertaining read. So the last book that I read in January was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. Now, this is another literary fiction type novel. This was written in 1995 and then translated to English. So this follows 40 women who are trapped underground in this bunker, and they have no idea why they're there or how they got there. Now, this is only 164 pages. However, I do not consider this a fast read. This is not one I would recommend if you're trying to meet a reading goal or anything like that. This is one of those stories where you want to read and digest every single word that is written, because it's all kind of important to understand the depth of the story. There's also no chapters. It's a single story all in one take, and there's hardly any dialogue because the character's writing in first person and recounting her experience basically of her life. And so from that perspective, we don't get a lot of dialogue. So that makes it even less of a quick read. Like, it's not a quick read by any means. Dare I say it's even a little laborious to read. And I don't even want to say pleasant. With what's happening, it's not enthralling. It's not very exciting. However, it is important. I don't know how else to describe this reading experience of this book and like the pacing of it. It is slow, it is very repetitive, but it's extremely profound and it's very thought-provoking. And I think with that alone, I could see this becoming a classic. It does make it worth the read. It is a tough read, you know, it's not something where you can like skim a page. I feel like, I mean, there are scenes where you could probably skim it, I guess. It seems like what's happening is a little bit mundane at times. And so it feels like it's a little bit of a work, it takes a little bit of work to get through. But then when you reach the end and everything, it blew me away, honestly. It did make me cry, which I found very interesting because our main character is not emotional. She doesn't really have the same emotions that we do, you know? I don't want to say human, she's human, but you know, she's in a very strange setting. So she doesn't have the same experiences that like you and I have. So when we read it from her perspective, it brings emotion to us, and it's just a very unique experience. So this book is amazing. I do recommend it, not as a quick read, but just in general. I think it was really profound and really, really interesting story. Enjoyment-wise, though, I can only give it a 4. However, like I said, I could see this becoming like a popular classic one day. All right, let's talk about my DNF, which I put in quotes. It's a DNF, technically. I'm gonna revisit it, but I do want to address address it because I did read a lot of it this month and I thought I was going to finish it for this video and I just didn't. I picked up Parasite by Darcy Coates. I talked about Darcy Coates in my last reading video of ranking all the books I read last year because I read my first Darcy Coates of Dead of Winter last year. So Parasite is a sci-fi thriller horror that takes place on different moon outposts of different planets where there is this life form that can transform into other things, so it can become a human, you know what I mean? Kind of like The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. It's a little bit like that. I read 100 pages. I read 100 pages of this book, and it's kind of a hefty book, and I just did not get sucked in. Even after 100, I still was not sucked in. I think it's her formula for books is a strange one for space thriller. I feel like when you have a space horror, we need a little bit more world building, and we need a little bit more science fiction in there, but it's written like her other, I only have Dead of Winter to go on, but I assume she writes like this for all of her books because she writes very fast-paced thrillers. We need a little bit more to go on when it comes to a space thriller. So although I like my space horrors to be grounded in reality and feel realistic, and I like the descriptions to be easily understood by someone who's not science-brained necessarily, but this I needed a little bit more science. I wanted more science. And I think, honestly, her formula is a little exhausting to read because it is so fast-paced. It's just like, you literally get whiplash. I was getting whiplash when reading this because after 100 pages, we were already on 3 different moons. We were introduced to at least 3 characters each on each moon, and I was just like, I don't even know if these people are important. I'm not remembering any of their names. Like, it's just too much is going on. And you would think that would be good to have it be really fast paced because then you would read it really quickly and it would make it very exciting, right? But to me, it's again tough to get through because it's so much work. It takes work in your brain to constantly be like trying to follow everything that's happening because it's so fast. So I do want to finish it. I am going to go back to it. It was good. Like, I enjoyed where the story was going. It just, I'm a mood reader at the end of the day and I just wasn't in the mood. And immediately after I stopped reading this, I read 2 literary fictions. So that was what I was in the mood for, not a fast-paced thriller like this. You know what? Before we get into my February TBR, I want to show you 3 books that I recently purchased that I want to read soon, that are going on my TBR shelf in case you're interested. I think I'll just continue to do that in these videos as I go. Just anything book related, I'll put in these videos, like little book hauls, book reviews, obviously, TBR, fanfic, things like that. So first up, I got Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I just love anything water, any water stories I'm really, really into. I think the story sounds really interesting. This woman basically goes on this deep sea excursion and comes back to her wife, a completely different person, and her wife is kind of like dealing with her new wife's personality and things. I don't really know anything about it besides that, just by reading the back and everything and hearing about it. Honestly, the cover is what sold me, and I actually bought this from the UK. Like, I went and searched for the UK cover, which is this one, because the US cover I think is kind of boring and ugly and just looks like a regular little popcorn book you'd pick up at Target, whereas this cover is stunning. It is gorgeous. Next, I got Fantastic Land by Mike Bakoven. This just sounds like a fun book, like really fun. These people are trapped in this amusement park and it sounds like Saw. I don't know. They're like trying to survive in this theme park, and that's really all I know about it. But the setting alone just sounds like a really fun time, like a different kind of story and just a good setting. So I'm excited. I'm thinking it's going to be a pretty straightforward, fast read. I don't really know. Next, I got In Ascension by Mark McInnes. I hope that's how you pronounce his name. This seems, first of all, very long, but the pages are not really filled to the brim. This seemed right up my alley. This sounds like Interstellar a little bit, and that's my favorite movie of all time. This takes you from the depths, the dark, deep depths of the ocean, the trenches down in there, all the way up into space. And I, as you know, love water stories and space stories. Like anything that does not take place on flat ground on Earth, I'm into. So this goes here and there and everywhere. And it sounds like it's a very emotional story, and kind of like Interstellar, where love transcends time. Basically, love continues no matter how far. That seems like the theme of it. I don't know that much about it. I haven't read it, but it just seemed like something I would really like. Oh, you got clips?
Clips.
You got clips?
Oh, clips.
You got clips? Okay, now we're gonna talk about my February TBR, which I am a little bit nervous about. So I'm filming an entire video of only reading extreme horror for a month. So these are gonna be the only books I read in February, plus my fan fiction, because I need a little bit of a mental break, right? So they're all really short, so I think it'll be okay. I got Tender as the Flesh, guys. I'm gonna read it, okay? I know all the triggers. I have looked extensively into this book to see if I can handle it, and I'm pretty sure I'll be okay, okay? I've had some of you say, you're gonna be fine. I trust you guys a lot. But yeah, through my own research and through talking to a lot of you guys, I'm reading Tender as the Flesh. I'm kind of excited about it, to be honest. I want to see what all the hype is about. This was, viral for so long, so many years, and I was like, I'll never read that. And here I am, I bought it. And we're gonna read it in February. I got To Be Devoured by Sarah Tantlinger. Cannibalism, I'm guessing. It's very, very short. Can't even really call it a novella. Seems like a short story to me. Again, don't know too much about it, but I've heard it's on the extreme side. We got Wave by Samantha Kolsnick. This definitely seems a little bit out of my comfort zone. There's a lot of sexuality in it, and that's not typically something I like to read, especially in dark themes involved. But again, we're pushing my boundaries in February to see exactly where those boundaries really are. So we're gonna try. Next, Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This is a very famous book. I really thought it was longer. It's kind of short. Obsession with serial killers and true crime, and she crosses the boundaries on that. Seems like some commentary on true crime and like that obsession, but also it just gets really dark and extreme, I'm guessing. Again, no idea, but people talk about it all the time in the extreme horror community. So those are gonna be my books I'm picking up in February, and I'm actually gonna be starting this this week, actually, because when I'm filming this, it is February 2nd. So this is the month of extreme horror. So look forward to the end of the month when I post that video of me reading and see all my reactions to reading these. I'm gonna film reading vlogs of reading all of these books for you to get my impressions of them. Fanfiction update, I am still reading All the Young Dudes, and which, if you didn't know, is a Marauders fanfic, following the Marauders from Harry Potter. And I'm 40% of the way in, and that's the one I'm really sticking to. I still have a lot of Hermione ones downloaded. Well, I have like 3 downloaded. Some lighthearted, some not, because I really enjoyed Manacled, so I like the darker ones, personally, the darker Hermione stories. But I will read some lighter ones as well, because I just can't get enough. I feel like once you start reading Hermione, you just can't read anything else, but I'm forcing myself to read All the Young Dudes and finish it because I really love it. I really, really love it. I shouldn't say I'm forcing myself, because I genuinely love it so much. Like, I'm enjoying reading it so much, and I'm at the end of 5th year. So if you know, you know what happens. Anyway, really, really obsessed with that. Did not think I would become such a Marauders fan. But here we are, Marauders and Hermione. Those are my things I'm into in Harry Potter. Wolfstar, love it all. But I'm gonna use All the Young Dudes as like my palate cleanser when I'm reading all of this extreme stuff in February. So wish me luck. Anyway, let me know your favorite book that you read in January, or least favorite, whatever you want to share in the comments. Let's all talk about our reading wrap-ups for January in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.